I'm here to talk about digital art, drawing, and painting in Blender as a beginner. This is the second time recording this morning as a newbie. There are times where your sound doesn't work and you don't realize it doesn't work. I've tested it this time. It should show if I go to the settings of my software, it shows that it is picking up my audio. Thank you to the random person, Raphael, who actually responded in the chats on YouTube to get me fixing it and starting the podcast / show over again today. I talked for a really long time and I don't have water, but we want to try and get through this again and start over. Oh no. But thank you for that and for letting me know. I can't believe I was talking in silence on these platforms with no one can see, but one person told me, so we're good. Okay, today I want to talk about why would you want to switch over to a 3D software as a 2D artist. Now, there might be a lot of benefits for this. For me, one is I have a lack of skill, and you wouldn't think that jumping over to Blender would help with that. But when I'm trying to do and learn 2D art, I have the problem of not being satisfied with what I've created. There's not much skill. I want to see at least something that I like on the page and that I'm working towards. So Blender seems to elevate it a little bit more, that I feel more supported as an artist who's learning to make something more complex in a fun way. I think another thing about jumping over to 3D software is you can use it as a tool to elevate your line work. Comics, where was my note card? I lost my note card in the fray. There is Comics something relief on YouTube who talked about trying to do a comic book, and he had a lighthouse almost in every scene. And I can find this later and put it in the description. But he would use a 3D software, I don't know if he actually used Blender, to model his lighthouse and change the perspective of how it was appearing so he could draw it for his comics. I think that's brilliant. I think that's innovative. I think that's going to save you on time. But if anything, that's really going to just, if you don't have the skills to be able to spend all the time to hand draw it all, and some people are going to want to hand draw it all, Blender can make up the difference. Blender can help assist you in making some really cool art, even if you didn't have the skills that you think you need to create that art. It would be fun to hand draw everything. It would be fun to know how to hand draw and paint a product to all of the end result. Well, what if you made the comic book in Blender? What if you had the physical pages and you were able to make it in Blender, export it with the resolution, and send it out on its way? That's another thing that you can do in Blender. You don't need to just use different 2D softwares to accomplish that. Another thing is, why would you want to use a 3D software? So Blender has the coolest editing tools, you guys. The coolest editing tools. There's no more weird. I never figured out Krita's transform tools as a newbie. It was just way too complex to go in and try to move and warp and scale in a way that just wasn't working in a 2D space. I've been able to figure that more in a 3D space with rotating and moving, and it's very fun. So if you want to use different editing tools to help as a newbie, Blender's editing tools are worth it alone to jump over there. Another reason why 2D artists might want to use some 3D software is if you have the desire. You have the absolute utmost desire and urge to switch over. Do it. I went on a learning journey and I was looking at different 3D artists, like different concept artists or artists that sculpt, like Danny Mac 3D. And I went, I'm going to have to learn 2D before I could ever get over into a 3D space. My biggest regret. Because why? I was on Krita and I would look at these 2D spaces and I didn't like the art that I was really producing. And it felt flat. It's not really quite a pun, but it felt flat. It felt like I wasn't able to wasn't inspired. I wasn't inspired by the 2D canvas. And so everyone was saying, well, it's better if you learn these tools and how to operate within a program that creates 2D art. And then maybe later you'd be able to go into a 3D software program. But if you have the urge, do it, because I regret not jumping into Blender sooner. Blender has so many infinite possibilities when it comes to using their animation, their 2D things, and being able to create it in a 3D software is it's been the most inspiring. You've got a flat 2D canvas and you go to a 3D canvas where you can rotate around it. I think that rotation is my favorite, where if I just click my bottom middle mouse button on my pen and just rotate through, that is the most satisfying thing I can think of as I'm trying to do my art. So I think this is a topic I'd like to talk more about, and I'm going to revisit frequently why 2D artists maybe should jump over to a 3D software. I had once tried to ask some professionals this question and they just didn't have it in their workflow. They were children's book editors, or they were children's book illustrators, and they had built their career on making children's books and doing art and then selling those illustrations and making commissions. So the traditional artists, but they had no need to jump over into the 3D sphere. So I think there's a limitation of I think there's a lack of knowledge that people don't know what you can actually do with the 3D software. I didn't know that you use it for CGI and visual effects and movies. Like, in the back of my brain, I'm like, they have to do it somehow. But how? How is the nitty-gritty of using these softwares? And so that was life-changing in and of itself, that you could actually use this software for movies, games, more commercial projects. But then I started to delve more into the unconventional of artists who are actually using this in their own workflow. And we can take a break real quick so I can show you so I'm not jumping all over the place. I'll share my screen so you can see. All right, these artists that I found that are more conventional, because I didn't just want to jump into the making a live donut so that I could work on making visual effects for CGI projects. It's not what I wanted to do. I love watching Blender Guru's podcast and learning about it, and it's been so illuminating on what Blender can actually do. And I think we need more knowledge out there on different creative projects that Blender can create. But here's what I found from artists who are making kind of 2D art in a 3D sphere. Almost forgot how to share my screen. Okay, entire screen. First person I found was Sophie Jantak. And if you don't have visuals, you'll see the video on Spotify or if you go over to YouTube. So Sophie Jantak has all of these videos. And here's the thing. She would create these artworks that had this field guide style, but then she would have them rotate within the space. So like, watch this video right here. It's a video of trees and leaves moving off of trees with the rotation of just things moving. She created this little animation, but it could be 2D art. She could save this resolution as a PNG in an angle that would look well, and then she's created a 2D image, and she was able to do this in a 3D space. Let me see if there are any other ones that I can think of from the top of my head that might be good to show. She's got this really pretty one with a horse. So she's got you can kind of see it here in her banner, but she has these sketches of a horse. And then, oh, let's see. I think she has a whole video. A potential for grease pencil for illustrators and 2D artists. I'm pretty sure I've seen this before. So I'll have to go over and look. But let's see if we can find an end result real quick. Let's see. But yeah, so she would animate this horse, and this horse would be moving in a 3D space, and she's got her kind of field guide style off to the side, and you would see it, and the horse would be transforming into a horse or transforming into a skeleton. So she was my first inspiration to go, okay, I don't have to use Krita. I can just jump over into Blender and start from there. The next person who probably saved my life when it comes to wanting to learn Blender, is Gak. Gaku Tada. He's Japanese, and he does create these just absolutely gorgeous to like any angle of this. Sometimes you could literally put it on a canvas and frame it in your house. Like, this is absolutely gorgeous. It's hand painted modeling along with grease pencil strokes to paint, to draw. I think they're freaking amazing. And that's so he has a class that I am going to be taking soon. It's called a Blender 3D Essentials, and it's going to delve more into the modeling, not to commercialize the modeling into like making real life looking car driving through a cityscape, to how to model to make assets, I do believe. That's I'm excited because he has more of a deep paint. If I go on Skillshare and I look at all these Blender classes, I go, what are these projects that I want to create at the end result? Is it an end result? No. What he does, that little cute little cottage house that I'll play again, that's what I wanna be able to do. That's what I wanna be able to draw and paint and make and figure out different styles and creating it in the project. Like, look at those just those house bricks, haha, those shingles on top of the roof. They're so dynamic, but it's because they're 3D. Uh, so that is more the unconventional method that I'll share more on the YouTube channel of projects that I create from his course. Right now, I focused on a Sophie Jantak tutorial. It was this bonsai beginner grease pencil tutorial 3D bonsai painting. She used a 2.9 version. I did just create a video of a review of that and to show off the progress of actually making something in Blender. That is on my website at theartcrusade.com if anyone wants to check that out. That's going to be up on my website for a week before it goes out on YouTube, but you can check it out now if you go over there and join my free website. That's just a little plug, I guess. I don't know. It's free. I'm just trying to build a community of like-minded people who want to learn art. So I started with Sophie, and then we're going to make our own individual project. I'm going to make a grove of aspen trees that is similar to what I have learned from this class, but massively different because I did do a lot of things differently than what Sophie did and made my own workflow. And I'll share that. I'll share that on the channel. But these are just they just scream unconventional to me. Here's another one, Craft Reeper. Okay, so he doesn't have a lot of videos out, but I do very much appreciate him and his style. So he'll make these 3D artworks in a 3D space, and they're pretty darn cool. And he doesn't have a lot of videos, and I wish he had a lot more videos. But here's this one. There's this really like, who does that? Who draws a banana like that? That's so cool. It's awesome, and he's got different robots, and he's got some really cool elements, and he's got some videos on how he paints. He does hand-painted assets in a 3D space. These are the things that I want to be able to accomplish in Blender, and it leans more towards the making concept art. You could be using characters, making characters, creating environments, or creating different things. I think that's enough on that. We'll go to the next question. Hopefully that was a little inspiring for those who could actually see that. And I will jump back into the questions so you don't have to worry about me sharing my screen so much anymore. Real quick, because I can hear a child crying and I've spent way too long on this today, even though I had to restart. Is Blender an advocate for artists? 100%. I would say so Krita's not bad. Krita's not bad on Krita. It's not bad on the community aspect side of things. You've got Krita.org, and people respond pretty quickly on there. It's very user-friendly, very awesome. The community is there. I don't know how much life there is in the community beyond that website. There's a lot of people who teach on YouTube because it's free. So there are people who are trying to educate so people can get into 2D software and just start painting and drawing. Adobe seems more of like that elite professional space where a mentor might teach you Adobe, and it's something that you have to pay for. So it's more of your colleges or your institutions. It seems just more private and exclusive of a community that wasn't necessarily built for artists who are more into painting and drawing. It was more into photo manipulation, right? So it just doesn't seem like the company itself is an advocate for artists, but oh my gosh, was I surprised when it came to Blender. Blender had this just they update their YouTube every week. They do lives to get people interested in their builds and what they're working on, to know what their community wants. They've got blender.org. Actually, they've invested resources to teach people the projects that they're making. Like, this whole company screams that they're here to create a software that is for artists to create art. I've never been a part of that before. I've never had that before. So when I say that Blender is an advocate for artists, it really is. And it kind of it's got its own education of, now that I'm delving into this world, as I'm able to understand more of what these career tracks for artists are like. Like, you've got the movies, you've got the gaming industry, you have character development, you have 2D/3D animation development in Blender, and you're learning these skills that you can take into these different tracks of the industry that isn't talked a lot about with artists, at least not that I've really have heard before. Like, it's always about, like, oh, make an art, get a commission, like freelance. That seems difficult. And not a lot is talked about these different going into these career paths and learning software for that. And Blender, I think, is the perfect place to start because it's free. It's got so much investment into it and so much of the community invested in its future. How are they ever going to stop Blender? So it seems very secure, if that makes sense. Krita, it just didn't make me feel so secure, because what if someone else created a better 2D program that was not as outdated and more innovative? So, there's always that question in the back of your mind that if you invest time in learning a software, is it going to stick around? Blender, I will say, uh, this is going to jump into the next question for this next thought. So, is there a hard learning curve for 2D artists? Yes and no. Yes and no. My most difficult challenge is watching tutorials for later versions when I'm working on 3.6. So it's that for newbie, that seems very accelerated when there is a lot of change, but these changes are for a lot of the changes are for the benefit, for efficiency, for getting rid of, or just leveling up and elevating your experience in Blender. So that's very good. Oh, fly. That's very good. It's just challenging for a newbie, because a newbie they get so overwhelmed because they think, oh, this is accelerating way too fast for me. These changes are way too fast. But you're going to have that learning curve. It's always going to seem difficult as a new person going into learning something very technical, because Blender is very technical. And I just hope that people can overcome that thinking and just take it project by project. So for a 2D artist, what are you going to want to learn first? You're going to want to dive into the 2D animation. You're going to want to learn how to navigate with your pen. Ooh. You're going to want to be able to learn how to draw, because in Blender, I opened it up a couple times, couldn't figure out how to change the color. It's a simple button push, by the way, from materials to vertex color in the draw mode. But I didn't know that, and so it took me a minute, and I got frustrated, and I would just blah, 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 and then I had to go do research to figure out why that was happening to me. So it is research intensive, but it is so rewarding at the end of it. So that's why it's difficult. It's difficult for beginners, but once you start learning and delving into the Blender world, it gets easier and easier to know what you want to learn. Andrew Price, Blender Guru, I listen to his podcast, talks about you don't have to learn everything in Blender, and you don't, but you do have to understand what kind of project you want to create, what type of style that you're going for. And I do think it's helpful because once I learn one thing, I wanna be able to I've said this before, I think last time, I wanna be able to use Blender as my instrument, as my musical instrument. I wanna be able to know the notes. I wanna be able to know all the geometry stuff, all the lighting, all the kind of different special effects, because what if that stuff could make my art better? So there's, like, unlimited possibilities of wanting to learn with Blender. It doesn't ever just cap out. So if you don't wanna learn something right now, maybe you don't. But in 5 years when I go, "How did I never learn this before?" I look forward to those moments to just keep learning and growing in Blender. Alright. So, let's look at this question. This is the one question that would probably hold 2D artists back from switching over to Blender, I think, is the brushes. What about the brushes in Blender? Is it as vast and as curated as other software programs like Krita and Adobe? No, it is not. There are a lot of artists who do make their, brushes and put them in Blender and put them up for people. Sophie Jantak is one of them. But here's my thing. I got too focused on brushes before, just in a 2D software space, and I feel like I wasn't learning drawing and painting fundamentals. I think as a newbie, this is just my opinion, you stick to one brush. You learn how to paint with opacity. You learn how to paint with being able to do textures with a brush. I want to be able to make it simple for myself so my brain doesn't get overloaded and go, "Oh, I need this brush. I need this brush to make this gravel. I need this brush to make this grass. I need this brush to make some flowers." Like, I'd have a whole workflow of how I make an image, and then I'd have a whole workflow of when I would need to use a brush. That seems too complicated to me for me right now, and I feel like, mm, if I'm trying to learn skills, then I wanna be able to do it right, if right is the right version, because brushes are just another tool, just like Blender is a tool. Blender can elevate your 2D art, and digital brushes can elevate your 2D art. So it's just what do you wanna put the hard work in? I wanna put the hard work in actually using one brush to maybe learn how to make art on a page with one type of solid stroke, pen, airbrush, pencil. That's it. And then I wanna use the software to elevate that. So yeah, I've got a baby crying. Better hurry it up. If only I didn't lose all that time when trying to record this for 40 minutes and there was no sound. But giving you my full attention, isn't 3D unconventional? Or does this only pertain to females? Uh, there is a whole comment selection on Blender about where are the females in this industry, in CGI, in VFX. I know it's the same thing, and I keep using them as they're different, but in gaming and movies and concept art and different character creations, they're there. I mean, they haven't not a lot of them that I've found have started YouTube channels, but they're there. They're just plugging along and working. But why are there seem to be so few? Is it because it's so new and knowledge is just getting out there and knowledge hasn't been so widespread to these individuals? Or is it just because men were more interested in this first? If they were more interested in the technical side of these technical heavy programs to be able to create visual effects and all these different 3D animations, like, was it men who were more interested in this first, or was it females? If anyone would like, we could spend some time dedicating an episode to what people had said in this thread, and I'd be happy to go through and read and comment because it's kind of interesting and fun. But for women, I think this does seem like an unconventional path. I don't know why. It seems stupid because it seems so exciting and fun, but are women students more pushed towards wanting to make freelance, wanting to do children's books, or wanting to do just I don't know. I don't know. What is the answer? What do you think? Like, why do you think there aren't so many females who teach Blender or there's a couple. I found them. There's a couple. Some of them are way more technical than I am, and I can't understand them half the time. But that's just because I'm very simple and I'm trying to make something that is technical simple. So we can delve into that later. I hope maybe we've talked a bit about why a 2D artist might want to go into a 3D software. That's an exciting topic for me. I don't know if it sounds boring to other people, but that I'm excited to keep delving into this. There is my website that you can check out at theartcrusade.com. It is free. I pay $120 a month to keep this website going and active. I would love to create a community who wants to learn art just as much as I do, wants to do it in a 3D software space. You could be new, you could actually know what you're talking about and join the group and help others and create a safe space for artists to grow and to learn. My website is free. You can use it like a social media platform where you can talk to people, do posts, and there are spaces where I eventually want to go live and do my study sessions to show you how, as a newbie, how I transitioned over into the 3D sphere of using Blender. Thanks so much again to Raphael, who told me my sound wasn't on so that I wasn't talking for another 20 minutes more on that other live. And I look forward to doing this again very soon. You can always find me on YouTube. I would love if you like the channel, leave a review. That would be great. But you don't have to because I'll just be back doing this again with a review or not. I appreciate it. I wish it was a little bit longer today. Like I said, I spent 40 minutes before talking, and I think that was probably the better version of this podcast today. But this is such an interesting topic. I hope that we can revisit it. All right. Thanks. I'm going to go and rescue my husband. Okay. Bye.